Welcome. I'm your host, Terry Meer. All of us here at Sustainable Kashi are proud to provide these free classes for you every week to help us connect with our ecosystem and each other. Feel free to learn more about our project at sustainablekashi.com. Really excited for today's conversation because it's living in an eco-village, and we have a eco-village here that's actually located on an intentional community. So it's really exciting, and even more exciting, I will be hosting this class, which I haven't hosted one in an extremely long time. So please, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and we'll make sure that we either answer them here or on our Facebook community, because we want to make sure you get all of your questions answered. So my name's Terry Meer, and I am the director here at Sustainable Kashi. And we actually have 80 acres of intentional community that was started back in 1976. We're one of the oldest intentional communities here in the United States. And it was started by Ma Jaya, who was a guru who was building a place to spread her teachings in the basis of love and kindness. So it's a beautiful space. If you've ever had the chance to be here, it's quite lovely. And about 8 years ago, the children of the land started a sustainability movement. So one of the kids named Susei found permaculture. So he wanted to bring that to his community and really bring sustainability and a connection to the earth. And the community welcomed him, open arms. And that's where I came in. So he contacted me to get a little bit of how do I do all this? And it is quite amazing the growth that has happened here in the last 8 years. So in that time, there's been 300 fruit trees put in the ground. There's 9 gardens. And my favorite part of the project is the off-grid eco-village. And this is where you can come get your hands on the technology that will help you live a regenerative lifestyle. And a lot of people never get to see these things in action, much less touch them and use them. So it's a great place to get that experience. So we'll start off with just, if you can type in where you're from. I'd love to hear where everybody's from, and that way we can kind of see how this is going to relate to you and your place. Or if it's great seeing you too, Happy New Year. All right. So first question is, of course, what is an eco-village? So one of the best definitions for eco-villages is a community that's consciously designed through locally owned groups. And the process is to regenerate our social and natural environments. And there's a lot of eco-village. There's a website, the Global Eco-Village Network. I highly recommend everybody check that out. And they've worked with the UN on a global level to work on making small, decentralized, sustainable communities. Very exciting project, and they've done some great work. Now, the big issue with eco-villages is there's not a manual that you can just follow. You can't just open a manual and say, this is how you start an eco-village, because there's so many different reasons to start an eco-village. There's so many different locations to start one. So if you're in the tropical rainforest, it's going to be extremely different than if you're up in Canada, just trying to stay warm. So the technologies are going to be different, and there's going to be a lot of differences. But what the Global Eco-Village Network has done is kind of boiled it down to a core set of things that's going to kind of pertain to everyone. And that's pretty exciting. So what we're going to do is kind of the eco-village concept. It's going to be the town center to open a bunch of conversations for us today. So today we're going to be talking about minimalism. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to talk about food. And of course, the most important, community. And then how to get any of these projects started if you want to either live in an eco-village or if you actually want to start one yourself. So if I were to ask, who wants to live a completely regenerative lifestyle? How many would raise their hand? I mean, I'm seeing all sorts of hands coming up. This is something that, yeah, of course, who doesn't want to live a regenerative lifestyle? But then if I were to ask, how many of you are living a 100% regenerative lifestyle? Yeah, exactly. I'm not seeing any hands. And so the big question is, what's stopping us? And it's kind of exciting because I'm going to give you the answer right now. Like this is wonderful. It's like all this time you've been waiting for the answer. I'm going to give it to you. And the answer is in one simple word, and that's biomimicry. So nature has these truly regenerative lifestyles going on every day out into the forest. If you go out into a deep old growth forest, you will see a completely regenerative lifestyle. These trees are growing, they're dying, they're feeding microorganisms, everything's symbiotic living together. It's pretty beautiful. So where does the breakdown start to happen? And it's mostly in the human conditions, the human stories. We tend to add needs that take us farther than our inputs will give us. And so I like to think of this kind of like a painting. If you're looking at like a big painting and the whole canvas is just all this beautiful, beautiful art, and that is nature. That's what we're living with. Those are the rules that we have to work with. And we've scribbled all these little things like permaculture or Buddhism, or we've got all these little human stories that we put on these paintings, and we're looking to those little scribbles for the answers. But really, the answer lies in the whole canvas. And there's a set of rules that have been working for millions and millions of years. And we're like trying to go past those rules. We're trying to circumnavigate those rules. And obviously, it hasn't been too successful. We've created a bunch of failed systems. We've created toxic lifestyles. And as we can see, we're not really moving in a direction of a regenerative planet. So how do we change this? And this is a question people have been asking for a long time. And one of my favorite examples of this is the Biosphere 2. The Biosphere 2 is a project in Oracle, Arizona. And it was originally started as a way to explore closed loop systems in outer space. So we're trying to find a way for humans to live in a truly closed looped system. And it was originally built in 91, and it's only run twice in its existence, once in 91 and once in 94. And as you can imagine, both times failed. Now, the first time failed because they were like running out of oxygen. They were running out of food. It was a serious problem. And then, of course, the people were kind of at each other's throats. The second time in 94, they figured out the oxygen, they figured out the food, but people were still at each other's throats. So the social aspect tends to be the hardest aspect in a closed looped social system. And that's pretty interesting when you look at it, because the food, the water, all that stuff is kind of easy, but actually getting along and creating a system where we can all agree, that seems to be a little more difficult, and that takes a little bit more conscious thought. So that's usually where I ask people to start when you're thinking about intentional community is, do you really want to live in community? Because there's a lot of challenges involved in it. Another thing to think about in a eco-village setting, typically a simplistic eco-village setting, is minimalism, living with less. So I used to install solar systems on people's houses. And the number one question I'd always get is, how much solar do I have to be off grid? And that's not really the right question. That's kind of the way we're approaching a lot of our issues is, what do we have to throw at the current situation to keep us going? Well, if we really look at where we're going, it's not towards a regenerative future. We're kind of heading in a very not productive way. So the real question is, how can I simplify my life to get closer to regeneration, to get closer to a regenerative situation? And I kind of first experienced this when I moved to Hawaii. I moved to Hawaii back in 2005. This was after my corporate career. I was walking away from the materialistic world, and I sold everything I had, and I got myself down to 2 duffel bags of possessions. And this was right at Christmas time, and my family was like, well, what do you want for Christmas? And I could truly answer, nothing. There was no material possession that I wanted that would not just cause an extra burden to me. And this was a freedom that I'd never felt in life. So to remove yourself from those material possessions, you start focusing on relationships. You start focusing on your connection to the earth. And what you find is important shifts. And I think that that's a pretty important place to come from. So that shifts us into how important community is to us. And community has been my strength. It's been my foundation. And I can't ever imagine living in a way without community again. It's been so long where community gives me my strength that I don't even know where I'd be if I were just living in a condo again. It would just be so strange for me, especially during this time of COVID. COVID has shown me lessons that community gives us resiliency. And when you think of like large ecosystems, diverse ecosystems, the more diverse the ecosystem is, the more resilient it's going to be. So in this COVID time where people have been kind of locked into little Zoom boxes, we really see the value of diversity, community, being able to interact with people that are really connected to our lives. And then also, we've been able to weigh out what's not so important. So small, decentralized, regenerative communities are far more resilient, far more stable in disaster. And whether you're just a closed loop system or you're just supplementing your eco footprint, whatever level of the scale you're on, I believe we should all transition into a more regenerative lifestyle through these communities. That's my personal belief, and that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing. I personally have had more lessons living in community than many other times in my life. And if you want to become a better person, live in community because there's nowhere to hide. And if we live alone, it's real simple to hide those parts of our personality that we might not be proud of. Maybe we're judgmental. Maybe we're short-tempered. Who knows? There's tons of things that we're all dealing with in this life. But once you get in community, all of a sudden you have all these mirrors just pointing right back at you. And it's like, oh, that's me. And I like to think of it as, has anybody ever collected precious stones or rocks where you have to polish them up? Well, what you do is you put them in a tumbler and you just kind of tumble them around. And I like to think of that as community. And we're all sitting in that tumbler, just polishing each other up. And it's a gift to be able, and I thank the people when I get in conflict now with my community, I say, thank you. Thank you for showing me that. And it comes from a place of humility, just to be able to sit in that place of growth. And I'm just grateful to be growing and really grateful to be in my community. It's important to know that eco-villages aren't designed from the outside. That's why there's not a manual. That's why there's not something that says, this is how you start an eco-village, go start one. They're so individual. They're actually designed by the community themselves. And I started about 20 years traveling to different eco-villages, and I've never seen an eco-village where it is today at a place where they started out. All of them change over time. And the older eco-village you get to, the more you'll see things shift. Like a lot of them will start off idealistic for some cause, and then that shifts into something very different over time. So these projects will shift depending on the people involved. So you can't really design them from the outside in. You have to be part of them to understand the shifts, just like a garden. Anybody plant or design a garden and it come out exactly like you planned? You come back like a year later and it looks just like it's right on the paper. It's like, oh, right, that's exactly what I wanted. No, that doesn't happen because nature has its own course. And our job is to observe, interact, take that feedback and be able to shift with it. And that's one of my favorite parts about a eco-village model. Now, the Global Eco-Village Network have come up with 4 components of an eco-village. and that's social, ecological, economical, and cultural. And these are things that all villages should understand their position on. Like I've seen eco-villages that just never look at the economic component of the village, and they don't tend to thrive. Most every eco-village will have to have some kind of concept of economy, whether it's shared time bank, internal economy, separate economy, trade. I've seen a lot of like out at not White Rabbit, um, Twin Oaks in Virginia, they made hammocks. So it was an egalitarian community where everyone shared the profits, but they sat around and they made hammocks all day. And they made millions of dollars selling hammocks. I believe it was up to Pier 1 Imports. They sold so many hammocks, and that's because they found something they could do. They understood they needed economy, and they funded the entire village on it. So it was a wonderful concept. Now, ecological eco-villages are actually not too common. And that surprised me because that's the space I came from, looking for earth-based eco-villages. And honestly, I haven't found too many. Most of them are either spiritual based or socially based. So it's interesting. I do see a lot of eco-villages starting out for one reason and then shifting to ecological, because obviously the longer you exist, the longer you can understand the importance of our planet and that we're all part of it. But I recommend checking out some of these like intentional communities and eco-villages. You can go to ecovillage.org or ic.org. That's intentional communities. And they just have wonderful examples of what is being done out there and what you can do. So different eco-villages has different strengths. But they're all going to be involve these components. The energy of an eco-village is extremely important. How are you keeping the lights on? How are you running the blenders if you have electrical blenders? An interesting fact is that 100 Americans waste about $130 billion every year on wasted electricity. These are those little lights that get left on your TV or on your the phantom power things, those things that just get left on, about $130 billion every year. And these are just things we're not even aware of. And there's a saying that if you waste, you'll never have enough. And waste is built into our culture. So when I designed the eco village here at Sustainable Kashi, I designed it for 4 people with enough power for one day. So roughly 250 watts per person per day. So that was enough to charge a cell phone and put on some lights and maybe a fan or two. Not a lot of energy. And people would be in the eco village and they'd come up to me and they'd say, hey, your system's broken. It doesn't work, because they would leave the lights on, or they would, however the energy is wasted, the batteries were empty. And I'd like, hey, yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the system. And I just let it sit, because every day it would regenerate. So then you'd have another 250 watts to work with. And then the next day, maybe they didn't leave the lights on. So those teachers, those natural teachers of not wasting, are very effective in an eco village, because if I were to add more solar power, if I were to add more energy, all I'm really doing is enabling that waste. How can we live in a way that's actually living on what the energy coming into a system is? And that's why I've designed this system so small. Granted, 250 watts a day is extremely small, but it has taught a lot of people. There's lots of different ways to get power into an eco village. One of my favorite was Earth Haven. This is up in North Carolina, and that uses a hydro power. They have a small river system. Has anyone seen this system? It's absolutely absolutely beautiful. And they power a large portion of their community simply on a passive paddle wheel. And these wheels are truly effective. If you build systems that capture water, you can create extremely large amounts of power. You need roughly about 50 gallons a minute passing to create an effective amount of power. But you can also use these as kinetic powers. If you ever go up to the Blue Ridge Mountains, there are some old mills up there that capture power that can be used to grind wheat or power tools. And those systems are still up today. They're like 100 years old, still operational because they're just so resilient and so reliable and simply just use kinetic energy. Those hydropower systems are absolutely wonderful. If you live near any kind of water source, it's a great way to plug into an eco-village. Wind is another wonderful energy source. Usually you have to get up around 60 feet or so to have an effective wind if you're using it for a large scale system. Smaller scale systems can be nice. Here in Florida, they're not too cost effective, but they are great supplements. There's lots of wind. If you ever go out to like Maui or California, you'll see these beautiful wind farms, and they're extremely effective because they have that consistent wind coming in. I've used them on sailboats with solar wind combination, because when the sun is not up, usually it's stormy and the wind is blowing. And when the sun is up, you have solar. So they're great combinations like that, but also wonderful ways to get power into a village. Another way, form of energy we use is methane gas. And these are methane digesters. They can take food waste and actually turn them into methane gas. So as the anaerobic bacteria is breaking down the food waste, it creates methane gas. You capture that and you can use that for cooking, lighting, all sorts of wonderful things, as well as create a liquid effluent that just works absolutely wonderful as a fertilizer. So here you're getting rid of your compost, creating cooking gas, and creating fertilizer all in one system. So if highly recommend checking out some methane gas products. Home biogas makes a great system that's super easy to use out of Israel. And they're doing some great work out of that. Of course, here in Florida, we're the Sunshine State. So solar is just, it's kind of a rock star here. Really the whole earth is solar powered. If you think about it, like all the plants are using solar energy and we're using the plants. So it's kind of everything's resolved some form of solar, but photovoltaic is really what I'm talking about. And it just, it works great here. So there's lots of research on and lots of videos on installing solar systems. So I won't get too into that right now. Here in Florida, something I'm really excited about is tidal power. I happen to live close to Sebastian Inlet. And if you've ever seen the tides rip through Sebastian Inlet, it is just millions and millions of gallons of water flushing through these systems. Just a couple of turbines could power cities. And it's just an untapped resource. So these are ways I'm definite as far as fueling an eco village that could fuel a string of eco villages. So it's just a matter of transporting the energy to the village. And then a form of power that's often overlooked, and I think this is because of the inconvenience factor, is human power. Has anybody ever seen like one of those washing machines that you jump on a bicycle and start turning the washer? That's great. And I've seen a few of these systems and it's exciting. They have actually a gym that they've put kinetic energy captured. They actually have put motors on all of the exercycles and the treadmills so they're actually producing the power in the gym to power the lights and the power within the gym. So it's like using the human workout to power people working out. That's just brilliant. You could do this with dance floors. If you put servos on the dance floors, you could actually capture the people's dancing's energy. How would you like to sit under lights dance powered? That's pretty cool. So just different ideas to get out of the box to start capturing more energy, using less energy. And this is definitely something that every eco-village has in common. And there's some great examples out there. The other aspect in this is food. This is the eco-village lifestyle has connected me deeper to my food because it becomes part of your day. It's not just, oh, I got to go to the grocery store and get dinner. It's you spend your day harvesting the food, and then you spend your day preparing the food. And it's like the whole thing becomes sacred. I remember seeing a documentary with a Hopi Indian talking about corn. And if you've ever been able to experience this, this is not just a plant. This is not like, oh, I got to go plant the corn. This person said that each kernel was an ancestor and that she loved and respected each one of these kernels. And as she planted the corn, she was thinking of 7 generations into the future. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am gardening wrong. I was like, what am I doing? I'm just throwing seeds in the ground. I'm like just growing radishes, and when you start making this sacred connection with your food, it changes everything. All of a sudden, it changes how you eat. It changes how you cook, and it changes how you interact with the people you're cooking and eating with. And I had a conversation about GMOs, and this was with a very smart science-based individual. And she was saying that the future of humanity relies upon GMO food. We need to grow GMO foods or we're not going to have enough food. And it's scary that we're starting to accept that rationale, that we're willing to take our food into this production lines, test tube based reality because we're not willing to put the time and the energy into growing organic ways. And that's something we all need to face. And when we start separating ourselves from the sacredness of our food, we put ourselves into an unhealthy situation. And if our food is our medicine, I mean, whether you eat it, whether you dry it and encapsulate it, whether you steep it in a tea, whether you tincture it, however, this is a sacred connection you have with the earth. And it's wonderful to just spend some time really contemplating how you are connected to the food you eat. And I know the people on this call are, that's a conversation I'm sure you've all had with yourselves, or you wouldn't be doing the things you're doing. So food, extremely important. And I believe it's the thread that connects us all. We all eat. There's no one here that doesn't eat. So why can't we make that our universal connection that makes us all connected? Another one is, of course, water. How are you going to get your water? And I don't think people really contemplate and grasp how important water is, because there's so much of it, right? It's like over 70–80% of the planet. Why would we care about water? But if you really think about it, it's water, like I'm talking clean drinking water here. It's not very common. Of all the water on the planet, about 2.5% is actually fresh water. And of all of that water, the majority of that is either locked up in glaciers or it's underground and inaccessible. So of all the water on the planet, we're looking at about less than 1% of drinking water. This is what's running through all of us right now. And it's precious. So I would recommend, in developing an ecosystem, even in developing an urban setting, start thinking about where that water backup system is coming from. And here in Florida, we get 50 inches of rain. Out in California, you're getting about 14 inches in spots. So rainwater has its benefits, and how you do it's going to change based on your location, but just has so many benefits. I mean, that self-sufficiency of knowing you have a stockpile of water to use for your plants or yourself gives you that sense of security. And the more rainwater we divert, the less we're using to pump out of the ground, or the less we're pulling from municipality sources. And those municipality sources have chlorines and have been treated. I'm not sure those are necessarily what you want to be ingesting. I do know that if you put a goldfish into a bottle of tap water, they die. So you might want to think about that. So also taking rainwater, we're actually reducing the salts as it dissolves salts through the soil. We're using fresh water. We also, rainwater is less expensive than groundwaters overall. And also in coastal areas, which I happen to be in, it stops saltwater intrusion. The more water we pump up from the ground, the more the ocean water comes up and the more salt we have. Here in Sebastian, I grow celery and it is pre-salted. It already has salt as a celery accumulates salt in the ground and it is salty right out of the grounds. And that's just from the ocean water actually coming up from our soils. So it's something to think about, using fresh, delicious rainwater. So Sustainable Kashi is about, like I said, about 6 years old now. And our main goal here in the Eco Village is to change people's lives. We want to be able to give people access to what it's like to connect to nature, to connect to simplicity. And we're designed to run about 35 people through the system every year. So 35 people get to live in an eco village every year. And that's pretty exciting because I've seen people come in and when they first get here, it's usually just like, what is this? You know, this is crazy. You guys are nuts. And then the second week, it's like, okay, this is kind of cool. And by the time they're leaving, they're talking to me about how do I get back here? Because it's that piece of you, that natural connection. So back in 2008, I built a log cabin. And when I built the log cabin, I lived on the land. So I was basically camping for a year and a half. And when I finished the log cabin, I remember staying inside and I was like, man, I liked it better when I was sleeping outside in the woods. And I had that circadian rhythm. I got up with the sun. I went to sleep with the sun. I felt the seasons. I knew what phase the moon is. Like, how many people know what phase the moon's in right now? It's interesting. Yeah, well, yeah, Mark, come on. I know. So definitely. And I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see an example of one of these lives changing, because about 3 years ago, we had a young individual, I believe she was 20 at the time. Yeah, 20 at the time when she got here, and she's 23 now. And I wanted her to tell you her story so you could kind of get it firsthand of how living in an eco village can really change your perspective. So please, Amy, take it away.
Throw it out there. I'm always nervous to speak out loud. But yeah, so when I first came here, I didn't even know what I was coming to come see. I was just craving living in tune with nature. It was like some weird calling that I felt I didn't quite understand. Though when I learned finally about permaculture and went through the permaculture design course here, I got it. I was like, this is what I'm looking for. I feel like I grew up in the normal way of life, just wasting and not even thinking about it, not thinking about where energy came from. I hated my grandma's compost. I thought it was ridiculous. I found out later she just didn't use enough leaves to make the smell go away. But yeah, I was just hungry to live without as much waste. I went traveling after getting out of my family home and just found I need to be in tune. I need to be in community. I need people that think like me. I don't think anybody thinks like me. I finally got here and got to hear some of Terry's teachings on permaculture, on sacred ecology, obviously living in the eco village. And like, I was just completely hooked. Once I moved into the eco village, I had obviously with the energy thing, I really did have a problem. I was like, Terry, your system's broken. This thing sucks. You need to come fix it. And he was like, okay, how about you just try to not leave your lights on? I was like, no, I swear I didn't. And then as the weeks went on, I realized I did. And I started learning how to waste less. I started like, it just felt so good to wake up like in already in nature, step with my bare feet all over the property and learn how to garden, learn what composting was, why it even mattered, what the five reasons for mulching, and just learning how to live in tune with nature. And it was just, I mean, obviously I'm still here. My life's just completely changed. Living in community was mind blowing. I mean, I grew up with a big family, so I was kind of used to being around people, but being around people who like each other, that was different. People who came together intentionally to live in tune with nature, to live in tune with a lot of people here on a spiritual path, to live with their beloved. It's just I clearly I love this place a lot. I love getting to be here and getting to be with my new family. So thank you, Terry, for all of your teachings, all of your just wonderful wisdom that you're imparting on me and all these beautiful people. And I hope this work continues into the future.
Well, thank you, Amy. And it's honestly such a joy having you part of the program because it's all about succession. And I see all of our communities here as just these huge food forests with all these layers. And we have these elders that are this canopy layer that have all the wisdom and are showering us down in nutrients. And then we have these emerging layers that are coming up, and we're all in different places in the food forest. And I think the beautiful part is that if we're lucky, we get to play each role, and eventually we're going to end up as that old growth. We're going to end up as that mentor, that support species for a younger crop. And Amy personally gives me a lot of hope, because I know when I was 20 years old, I was not really thinking about living a regenerative lifestyle. And it's exciting to see a younger generation come in excited about living with the earth and not fighting her, not seeing what resources they can pull out of her, but actually learn how to live peacefully walking with her. And it just fills me with great joy. I remember talking to a 14-year-old girl who was at a retreat here, and she just had such wisdom. She came in and we're talking about the snow is not, it may be wonderful for the skier up on the mountaintop, but for the truck driver trying to go home, it can be a scary event. And I was like, what kind of 14-year-old is having these thoughts? And I think it's like a pioneer species. If we disrupt a land, it's going to put up all these healing nitrogen fixers. And I believe that's where we're at in history. I believe that these younger generations of just enlightened, earth conscious young people are a pioneer species. They're here to heal the ecosystem. And it fills me with just amazing inspiration. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm definitely looking forward to more and more sharing with the next generations. So the next and final subject is, how do you start a eco village if you're actually interested in it? And it can be easier than you think. When I was first starting out, I was hooked on the idea that I had to start it. I had to go buy the land, and I was going to get together with 10 of my friends. And I mean, I had it all drawn out, and it was like the houses were all together, and in the center was this, I mean, I had the exact vision of what it looked like. And as I got older, I suddenly realized that I didn't need to do all that. I didn't need to be the creator and the ruler and the dictator of how things go. So I just opened myself up and just said, how can I add to an eco village? And it's much like that food forest I was talking about. Every plant within it has a niche, and no one plant dominates the whole thing. So I believe there's a sense of humility that goes with the creation of an eco village, because it's kind of hard to get a bunch of people all together under the same ideas and same thoughts. It's a very tricky thing to do. And when we remove ourselves and our ideas, it makes it a lot easier. So I recommend touring eco villages, seeing other people's, seeing what you can add to them. And there are so many amazing projects going on right now that it's so easy to get involved. And the other way to start would just be to start potlucks. Get up in your neighborhoods and say, of course, this is going to be a post-COVID thing. Um, get together and talk. You can have these Zoom calls. There's so many ways for us to get together and share these ideas, because ultimately the idea is to make a regenerative planet, to help each other heal ourselves and heal the world around us. And I think we have all the tools to do that. And just on this call alone, I believe we could make a significant difference in the future of our ecosystem. So that's basically what I wanted to share here today. Is there any questions, Amy, that looked
Yes, I actually had a question. I was wondering how complicated slash expensive would it be to transform a regular house into a sustainable, if not regenerative, living space?
Great question. It's interesting. That question is actually super interesting, because when I first went to college back in 19, I actually went to convert fossil fuel homes into alternative energy. And so I went into the counselor's office and I was like, okay, I want to convert these homes into regenerative energy. What degree do I take? And they were like, what? We have no idea what you're even talking about. This was before there was any kind of alternative energy courses and majors and environmental sciences. These things didn't exist. So they put me in architecture classes and they put me on a board starting to do civil drafting. And I was like, no, 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 this is not it. This is not what I was talking about. So I had to do all my education away from college in that. And it's actually extremely simple. Now it's much harder to to retrofit a home into regenerative technology than it is to build forward. So it's always simpler to put in a gray water system than it is to retrofit a gray water system. Now, the biggest issues with this is a lot of municipalities and zoning issues. So that's a lot of times the biggest hurdles. But we're making great strides, and I'm actually working with an eco village right now that's doing a very large gray water and solar system that is just like the county didn't know what to do with them. So it's nice because more and more people are doing these things. So it's exciting as we ask for them. The powers that be are shifting with us. This is the same with composting toilets. I remember I used to be really afraid to even talk about a composting toilet. And now I've let go of that fear, because we need to move forward with these technologies. We need to be able to look at our poop, we're not necessarily using those words, and realize that we are doing it wrong. When we are using the bathroom into drinking water and then using chemicals to treat that drinking water instead of turning that into fertility, we have some issues that we really need to think about. So it can be extremely cheap. The reason I got into this was because I was broken. I wanted organic food. I wanted to live this lifestyle and I didn't have the money to do it. Organic food is cheap. My problem right now is, what do I do with the truck full of organic food I have? I literally am trying to give away papayas because I can't eat them all. And it's like, you know how much an organic papaya is in the store? It's expensive. So it's interesting. It's actually cheaper in a lot of ways to shift into this lifestyle. Now, if you're talking about just solar energy or just composting toilets, it's not too expensive, and most of these systems will pay for themselves over time. Great question.
Thank you. As we're getting close to the end, I was throw this question out there. Are we open to visitors for touring? And is it possible to visit Sustainable Kashi? Let you answer.
Yeah, we're not quite open yet. We are looking to reopen in June, but we'll definitely open in September. It's a little tricky with our COVID situation, and we're really trying to be safe because we are an intentional community. So this is people's homes, and we're really trying to respect that safe space for people, yet becoming a demonstration education place as well. So it's hard to balance those two sometimes. So for safety's sakes, yeah, we still have the gates closed, but I am so excited to start welcoming people back in September and more, yeah, more and more. We're building so many systems right now. It's kind of amazing. It's people are going to be amazed when they walk back onto the property. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This is honestly my playground. Intentional community, regenerative lifestyles. This is why I do the work I do. And I believe it's the only way for us to walk forward together. And in community, with organic food, learning from each other, we can't fail. We are weaving a blanket that is so strong that we're going to be able to withstand any kind of adversity. And I believe that we are the strength of the future. And I look forward to building this beautiful regenerative community with each and every one of you. So thank you so much for joining us today on this important conversation. And I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. Thank you.